Hello and welcome to the Zoho Sprints introductory webinar. I'm Aparna Sridharan and I'm going to help you get started with Zoho Sprints. Let's begin with a small presentation on Zoho. Zoho Corporation is a company that's been around for 20 years now. The Zoho suite of cloud-based apps acts as an operating system for your business. This means that we have an app to cater to all your business needs. We have CRM to manage customer relations. We have Desk to manage customer tickets. We have Books for accounting, and so on. The latest addition to our comprehensive suite of apps is Zoho Sprints, our agile planning and tracking tool. So what is agile? The agile methodology defines a set of principles with which your team can cope with fast-changing requirements without having to start from scratch. It proposes releasing your product in iterative sprints rather than in one big cycle. Now let's take a look at what the agile workflow looks like. First, we have the product backlog. The product backlog is a list of all the work items that needs to be completed. It's usually prioritized from high to low. From the work items in the product backlog, we plan our sprint backlog. A sprint is a time period of anywhere between 1 to 4 weeks. The duration usually depends on the team. From the list of work items that need to be completed, we decide the ones that we plan to do in the upcoming sprint duration. Once our sprint backlog is planned, we can begin working on it. While our sprint is active, we have daily stand-up meetings to discuss a few things. We discuss what's happened in the past 24 hours, what's planned for the next 24 hours, and the challenges that we face. Ideally, by the end of a sprint, you should have a concrete update or a product. Now let's go into our product, Zoho Sprints, and see how we've emulated our workflow there. Once you sign into your Zoho Sprints account using your username and password, you will land in the projects page. This page lists all your active projects. Okay. Here you can see the project, the percentage of completion, the category that it's grouped under, the number of sprints, stories, tasks, and bugs, and the start date and the end date. Let's try creating a project of our own. Let's call our project Online Shopping. You can group it into categories like we did, or leave them ungrouped. You can specify a start date and an end date. You can add a description if you'd like. Now quick create lets you skip over the next few steps, but let's specify a few more parameters. Invite users using their email address and by specifying their role. Now Zoho Sprints has 3 roles: member, manager, and admin. An admin has access to all the projects across the portal. A manager has access only to the projects that he's a manager of. A member has access only to the sprints that he's a part of. Now here, Zoho Sprints prompts you for the estimation type. Estimation type is a relative scale with which you can grade the difficulty of a work item. For example, tying your shoelaces is a 1, while making dinner would be 8. The default estimation type we use is Fibonacci. You can also create a custom estimation type which is more suited for your team. We've successfully created our project. Once your project is created, you will land in the plan module. Now the column on your left is your product backlog, and the one on the right is where you plan your sprints. Now since we've just begun, our backlog is empty. Now let's create work items. There are 3 kinds of work items: a story, a task, and a bug. Let's create one of each. A user story is a requirement from the user's perspective. Now let's say I'd like more payment options so that I can pay cash on delivery. Now you can add a description if you'd like. Now you can choose whether you want to add it to the backlog or to sprints which haven't begun yet. Since we haven't planned any sprints, we'll add it to the backlog. You can choose the people who will work on this work item and also select estimation points. You can specify a start date and an end date and say save. Now let's create a task. A task is a software requirement from the developer's perspective. So let's say add finance integrations for timesheets. Now we'll add it to the backlog here. Going to select 2 people to work on this. We've assigned the estimation points and we say save. Now for the bug. A bug is just something that needs to be fixed. So let's say the add to cart button isn't working. I'm going to add this to the backlog as well. So there. We've created a story, a task, and a bug. Now that our backlog is sufficiently populated, let's go back to our workflow to see where we stand. So we have a product backlog. So what's the next step? Planning our sprint backlog. Now in the right column, you will find a create sprint button. I'm going to call my first sprint the first one and create. Now you can either create new work items for this sprint or just drag and drop the items from your backlog like this. So now we have 2 work items in our backlog. What's the next step? Sprint. At the top right, you'll find a start button. Yes, let's start our sprint. So once you begin your sprint, you'll be taken to the board module. The Scrum board is where you can track where each of your work items stands. Now, since we've just begun, both of them are in the to-do list. Now you can drag and drop them across statuses like this until they're all done. So all of our work items are done. Now at the top right, you'll find the option to complete sprint. Our sprint is complete. And we've reached the end of our workflow. Now to understand sprints better, let's look at a project with some preloaded data. Now this example is of online shopping again. Now once your team starts to get a little busy, your plan module would look something like this. You have an extensive backlog and you have a sprint already planned. Now let's look at the board module. Now this will be your board module. Now let's look at the statuses. We have to do, in progress. We also have design phase, built-in local, content phase, and push to live. Now these are custom statuses which can be configured as per your requirements. At the top left, near the sprint name, you'll find a view details button. Here you'll find dashboard, comments, timesheet, meetings, and users module exclusively for the sprint you're working on. Now if you're a member who's working only on this sprint or the manager of this sprint, you'll find that this dashboard is a better alternative to the project dashboard, which tracks the overall progress of the entire project. Now let's look at the charts here. The first chart tracks the number of open and closed work items in your sprint. The second donut chart tracks the division of work items as stories, tasks, and bugs. And within that, it tracks the status of each work item. The third chart helps you track the productivity of your users. Now you can find the amount of work items assigned to each person here. Now this is an activity graph. Now with this, you can get an idea of the sprint activity across your timeline. For example, on November 21, 3 work items were added. 1 work item was moved across statuses. 3 work items were closed. And 3 work items were reopened. Now this tabular column is a user summary. Now with this, you can see the number of work items assigned to each person and in what status they are currently in. The comments module basically works as a group chat for all the people involved in your sprint. We look at timesheets, the meetings module, and the user module at the project level. Now in the dashboard, at the top right, you will find a button to complete the sprint. Once you say complete, you'll be taken to this page. Now you have an option to move the remaining items to the backlog or to a sprint which hasn't begun yet. Let's move it to the backlog. So once your sprint is complete, we can go to reports to analyze our performance. The first chart we have is a velocity chart. For each sprint, it tracks the amount of estimation points committed and the amount of estimation points which were actually completed. For example, the shopping cart sprint, 50 estimation points were committed and all 50 estimation points were completed. Now the marketing sprint didn't perform so well. 140 estimation points were committed, but we managed to complete only 6 estimation points. Now using this data, an average velocity is computed. Now this will give you a better estimation of how much work you can take on in the next sprint. The burn down chart tracks the amount of estimation points remaining on a daily basis. Now here you can see a steady decrease. This indicates that as the days go by, the amount of work items that are yet to be completed keeps decreasing. Now let's look at another sprint. Now this sprint looks a lot different. Now plateaus would indicate days where the work's been stagnant, and peaks would indicate that work items have been added or they've been reopened. The burn up chart works exactly like the burn down chart, but the other way around. It tracks the amount of estimation points completed on a daily basis. Here we can see that it shows a steady increase, meaning as the days go by, work items are being completed. The cumulative flow diagram tracks the amount of work items in each status across the timeline. Here we're looking at 2 statuses, to do and push to live. The to do line shows a steady decrease, and the push to live, which is the last status in our workflow, shows a steady increase. Now we're looking at just 2 statuses here. You also have the option of adding another status, and that line will be added accordingly. Under reports, you have a list of completed sprints for which you can access the release notes. You also have a list of cancelled sprints. Now let's go to the dashboard. This is our dashboard. The dashboard gives you a visual representation of the different facets of your project. At the top, you can find the start date, the end date, and its current status. Let's walk through all the charts here. The first chart tracks the progress of your project on a weekly basis. It charts the number of closed and reopened work items for each day of the week. You can even select the week that you want to analyze. The second chart is a donut chart. It shows the percentage of open and closed items in your project. It also tracks the number of tasks, stories, and bugs in each category. On the right, you can find running counters for the different kinds of sprints. This here is the productivity chart. Now at a glance, you can see the number of work items assigned to each person in your team. You can also see the number of work items in each status for each person. Here you'll find charts for your backlog. You can track the number and the type of work items in your backlog to make sure it doesn't get out of hand. You can also see who has the most number of work items in the backlog. This is an activity graph. It shows you the activity happening in your backlog against a timeline. For example, on December 11th, 8 work items were newly added to the backlog. 3 work items were moved from the backlog to the sprint, and 5 items were moved from sprints to the backlog. The last one here charts the timeline for each individual sprint. For each sprint, you can see the percentage of completion, whether it's incomplete or being extended, and if it was completed, whether it was completed behind schedule or ahead of schedule. For example, the user interface sprint was completed successfully, but was delayed by 2 days. The shopping cart sprint was completed successfully and on schedule. The payment sprint is only 65% complete. It's incomplete and is being extended. The design sprint was completed way ahead of schedule. By clicking on the timeline of any one sprint, you will be taken to the sprint details page. At the top right, you also have an option to reopen the sprint if you'd like to begin working on it. Now that we have a good idea of what all these charts mean, let's go to the next module. The feed module works like any other social media feed where you can post statuses about your project. And like your social media, this feed is also personalized according to each person. Here, you will receive updates about all the projects you're working on. If someone mentions you or a work item assigned to you, you will receive those updates here as well. You can use @ to mention someone or #I to refer to a particular work item using its ID. You'll find 2 tabs here, Recent Feeds and Activity Stream. Every time someone updates the status of any work item, it gets reflected here. This means that all the members who are involved in the work item get intimated without having to constantly check the board. For example, John Marsh updated the item payment mode linking is breaking, check. He updated this item from push to live to content phase. You can also comment or start a conversation about any one update. The activity stream works more or less like an activity log for your project. Now let's look at timesheets. Now this module tracks the number of hours spent on your project. You can see the work item, the person who logged the hours, the number of hours spent, and whether it's billable or non-billable. Now Zoho Sprints has an approval mechanism. Each log can either be approved or rejected by the administrator or the manager. Once it's approved or rejected, that particular log can't be edited anymore. At the top right, you'll find a log hours button. You can select the sprint, select the user. Once you select the user, you can find the work items that they are associated with. Choose a work item, a date, and the number of hours. You can choose whether it's billable or non-billable. And that's how you log hours. You can view timesheets for each individual sprint or also in categories. For the category that you've chosen, at the top right, you'll find the total number of hours split as billable and non-billable hours. At the top right, you'll find a global timer feature. Now this feature makes it easy for you to record the amount of time you spend on each work item. Let me tell you how it works. Since this is a global timer, you can search for any item across the project. Select the work item that you want to work on and say start. Once you do this, you can see the timer under the My Timer tab, and the timer is running. So if you want to take a break, or if you want to work on another work item, then you can simply pause the timer. You will find that in your paused timers. If you want to continue working on the item, you can simply resume. Once you're done with the work item entirely, you also have an option to stop the timer. You also have a filter option here. You have different parameters using which you can filter your timesheets. Now let's look at the meetings module. This module helps you schedule and track your agile meetings. At the top right, you'll find a schedule button. Let's give a title for our meeting, Daily Stand-Up. You can specify an agenda if you'd like. You can choose the date and the time. You can either manually select the users or select a sprint upon which its users will be automatically added. You have a list of meeting types you can choose from. You can specify the location and the duration of your meeting. Reminders are notification emails which will be sent to the members to remind them to attend the meeting. Now, daily stand-ups happen every day. Now, you can schedule it just once and set the frequency as every day. This automatically schedules a meeting at the same time every day for the duration of the sprint. Now we say schedule. Once you schedule a meeting, you can also start a conversation about it. Now this basically works like a group chat for everyone who's involved in the meeting. Now you can filter meetings based on the type, or you can also search for meetings using advanced parameters. Now let's look at the last module, users. Now this lists all the users in your project. At the top right, you'll find a button to add a new user. You can either add an existing user from a different project or add a new user by specifying their email address and their role. With this, our webinar comes to an end. By now, you should be able to find your way around Zoho Sprints. Our free plan comes with 5 users and 5 projects. If you want to work on an unlimited number of projects with access to all the features, you can check out our basic plan. If you have any further queries, don't hesitate to mail us at support@zohosprints.com or tweet to us at Zoho or at Zoho Cares. Happy sprinting!